I'm Zachary Cartwright. This is Water and Food. Today, my guest is Adam Yee, who is the podcast host of My Food Job Rocks. He interviews people from the food industry and discusses why they love their jobs and how they got to where they are today. With over 250 episodes and hundreds of blog posts about career advice, Adam's goal is to show that the food industry is full of smart, driven, and passionate people. As of today, the podcast has been downloaded over 150,000 times, and his website has over 500,000 views, helping those who are interested in learning more about the food industry and helping other food scientists to network and grow their skills. Let's hear what Adam has to say on this episode of Water and Food. All right. Well, hi, Adam. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being on Water and Food.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks, Zach.
Adam, I know you have your own podcast, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what that podcast is and what listeners can expect to hear.
Yeah, so I run the My Food Job Rocks podcast. It's a podcast where we interview experts in the food industry about pretty much what they do, how they got there, and then we ask some questions about the insights that they have based off of their field of expertise. So it's a pretty well-run podcast with over 250 episodes, and also a content piece on a website called My Food Job Rocks, where I write pretty much every week about a topic I find interesting, from career advice to Myers-Briggs personalities, which is surprisingly the most popular articles on the website, and in general, just food industry insight. So I built this for over 5 years. I just did it weekly, and then it got a following. I would say that I worked a good amount on pushing it out there, and it's been very rewarding. It's been extremely rewarding to create something, share it, get feedback instantly, and have people tell their friends about it.
And where did the original idea come from to do this?
Yes. So let me remember really, really far back. It has been a while, but I will say that my second job, when I was in Phoenix, Arizona, I started listening to podcasts a lot as a way to learn more. I listened to entrepreneurial podcasts at first, just because I was kind of into it, and started to really like it during my morning commutes. And so, then once you listen to podcasts for like 3 months, everyone's like, oh, well, I should probably start my own podcast. But you never pull the trigger until something happens. And in this case, it wasn't anything like glamorous or anything, but I've noticed a few articles that posted about we need more talent in the food industry. And there are two articles in particular. One was from like the VP of Cargill. So you have like kind of this important person, quote unquote, talking about needing more talent. And then there was this person who just started her food recruitment company. And I reached out to both of them. Guess who responded? This person who was just starting her agency. And we got to talking about creating a podcast. And she let me have a lot of control over it. So I decided to launch it under her name at first, and then eventually moved it to its own home. I think the big thing to understand here is that it only worked because I saw that there was a need, which is pretty common in most idea formations. But because also there I had support. She was my biggest fan. She is my biggest fan. Every time we talk, it's always great to hear her. Her name is Nicole Gallus from Food Grads. And so she started the same time I did. It was the perfect partnership in terms of building that basis to launch and to just have that support network that even if you had like one follower, at least you had one follower that you want to keep on going. So that was the catalyst of starting My Food Job Rocks, was pretty much this one supporter that eventually grew to 2, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, and so on.
And how do you go about finding food scientists for your podcast? Are these people you know personally, or people that reach out to you, or do you do a lot of work trying to find a certain food scientist in a certain position at a specific company?
Yeah, so let me tell you the the evolution of how I got guests, because I would say
Mhm.
before when I would talk about it to students, I call it the snowball effect, and there are certain stages where I found getting guests the most effective. So the first time I started my Food Job Rocks, I actually contacted my college classmates who really like food science. The people that we talked all the time about kind of food, and some people had very specific topics. For instance, so when my first episode. Um, was my friend at a chocolate factory because he just could not shut up about chocolate. He would talk about chocolate all the time. His dream was to work in a chocolate factory, and he did it. He worked in San Francisco, Dandelion Chocolate, and he still works there now. You know, that tells you a lot, right? But that's that was one example. Like, okay, I know passionate people in the food industry. I'm gonna just talk to the people I know, my friends. So the first 5 episodes were pretty much my friends, and that's how I launched it. My friends from college in different industries, and it was really fun. So once I had like 5 episodes, I was able to share it with other people, and one person. And I first started with a professional called Howard Moskowitz. In the food science circles, he's pretty famous for a sensory scientist. And he pretty much discovered that people like different things, if I were to put it kind of bluntly. But he was recently posting on LinkedIn. So I shared it with him. It's like, hey, I'm doing this little thing. Do you want to go on? I've heard a lot about you. Kind of embellished it a little bit. And he was happy to go on, and that told me like, wow, people want to go on my podcast. And this guy is famous in his circle, so but maybe not in other circles. So I thought it was unbelievable, but in hindsight, I was like, okay, this guy just wants to be heard. And I noticed a lot of scientists that want to be heard as well. So once I had a capable set of people, it was easier to prove that I was like actually serious. But there's also other points where you weren't that serious. So like official organizations in food science like thought I was just like some kid just with a side project. And it took me a while to convince them that like this was a legitimate project. And this will happen all the time. So I think from 6 to probably 80 or 90, all I did really was scroll through LinkedIn a lot, find people who want to be known, and then this involves people who just post and maybe get like 5 likes on LinkedIn, and then I would reach out to them, and 90% of the time they would say, "Yeah, I'd like to be on the show," and I would interview them and post them, and people liked it. So. These would involve like young people, more experienced professionals. They would involve food scientists. They would involve marketing people. Anyone in the spectrum of the food industry, I would interview. And then there was a point then where PR firms would then Google like food podcasts, and then they would find my Food Job Rocks, and then they would reach out to me. So around maybe episode, I think 80 to like essentially 250 were actually half of them, I would say, or more than half were PR firm guests that PR firms would reach out to me and say, hey, this guy has a new book. Hey, this guy just launched a new restaurant. Hey, this girl has a new cooking demo. And we would collaborate with these PR firms to pretty much get them on board and do an episode, and that's where I met like a lot of amazing people. And one example is like Harold McGee, the guy who wrote on food and cooking, and he was kind of like this prime introducer of food science who I ever looked up to, and he had a new book out, and his PR firm reached out to me saying like, hey, you know Harold McGee? Well, he wrote a good book, and so it was great to like talk to him to promote that book, for instance. So that's kind of the basis of it, is that it was an evolutionary progress based off of how popular the podcast was, and I think that's I think to keep that in mind is that like these things are evolutionary as you grow with whatever you create.
And what is your own history or maybe your own experience with food science, going from studying food science, and then have you also worked in the industry some? Maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Great. Yeah. So I'm not legitimate. That's a weird word. I'm a professional food scientist. So I have my bachelor's at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I've done a whole sort of slew of jobs. They've all been incremental in my career growth, I'd say. You know, there are people who do like 8 jobs and they become stagnant at the end. But at least for me, I've had like, got like 5 jobs, I think. They've all been really important for me to grow as a food scientist. So the first job I had was working at a granola bar factory in Phoenix, Arizona. And this was like a 4 a.m. job, helping the line workers make granola bars. And I was supposed to be the process expert there, even though it was my first job, which, it was tough. It was a really tough job. But it taught me a lot about manufacturing. It taught me a lot about factory workers, the guys who are actually making your food. And it taught me how to be more sympathetic to them, especially when you design formula. So I took that into account for my next job at Isogenics, which is essentially a multi-level marketing nutrition company. I was a research scientist, which they treat very well there. And so I would design protein powders for the company. And that's kind of where I first got introduced to plant-based products. And so once I launched a few plant-based products, I did start My Food Job Rocks at that time. At around episode 102, I interviewed an animal activist named Paul Shapiro, who then 3 months later reached out saying, "Hey, do you know any food scientists who can help me on this new venture?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm a food scientist. I can probably help." And working with him, I was able to collaborate and create a company called Better Meat Co., which is still active in Sacramento, California. And they make alternative meats, specifically mycelium products. And so starting our business, I can probably go through another hour of that, but it was you just learn a lot of micro skills that you don't realize you learn until later. But it was a fantastic experience, which then I later moved on. I had a short stint at WeWork. If you guys don't know what that company is, there's a long history on that one. But short stint at WeWork to develop their food incubator program. But unfortunately, the pandemic did stop that project. So then I switched to Motif FoodWorks, which is a pretty well-funded food tech startup in Boston, Massachusetts, where I commercialized a precision fermented product, which is essentially bovine myoglobin that you can put into plant-based meat. And then after that, I just I don't know, either I had an existential crisis or I just felt like it was time, but I decided to quit that job and recently now traveling the world interviewing people for My Food Job Rocks, starting from Australia, and I don't know where we're going to end up, but right now I'm in Singapore.
What are some of the hot topics that you've covered recently? Like you just said, I noticed that you have plant-based meats and food innovation listed as some of your top topics on your LinkedIn. But since you talk to so many different food scientists, what do you see as maybe emerging topics or top topics moving into maybe the next 5 or 10 years?
That's a good question. I do ask that a lot with my guests, like, what do you see coming up? I think in a trending perspective, upcycling or they used to call it food waste, but that didn't sound as cool. So now they rebranded to upcycling, is getting popular, but it's it's not that popular, but it is getting there. I have a lot of friends in the industry, and I think it's what they do is really admirable. But it unfortunately doesn't get as much press as other food trends, which is a shame. But trends take time. I think the hottest topic is plant-based meat. It is going through a depression, like what is it, slope of depression, or it is going through. I guess a negative press cycle, I would say, which is fine. It happens in all industries. And I, not only am I kind of in that field, but I also have a lot of friends in that field. But that's going to probably keep on chugging, just because it's such a long game for a lot of people. And there's still a lot of money into it, and it's just there's some experiments that aren't going as well, and then we'll see another cycle of experiments, and maybe they will go as well, or maybe they won't. But that's always going to be probably a big topic for me. I would say also low sugar or reduced calorie sugar is probably going to be an everlasting topic in the food industry. There's always going to be a new sugar launching, like allulose was this year, or no, allulose was like 5 years ago, and now there's this new sugar, I forgot what it's called, that was popping up recently. So you're always going to have sugar reduction strategies in the food industry, because people just we still have a sugar problem in the food industry, so people are still going to try to figure out how to reduce that. And another one is cell-based meat. So meat created from a cell of an animal and grown is going to be a pretty popular high-tech topic in the future that, probably won't be commercialized in like 5 years. But there is a path going forward. I recall like 5 years ago talking about plant-based meat, and it's now pretty popular. So I think this is going to happen with cell-based meat as well. So those are kind of the main trends I've been talking to with people. And my network is mainly alternative meat people, and just because I have a lot of experience, and the community in the alternative meat space, they do want to help each other out. But I do think that as in the food, though the food industry is huge, but no one knows about it. The micro systems in there, whether it be food safety, which there are a lot of podcasts about food safety. Or what else is there? I guess like in general, like food news, which there are a handful as well. Those niches themselves also provide a lot of community and have a lot of people who want to talk in those specific podcasts. But food, there's like 5 food safety podcasts, so I tend to stay away from them. But sometimes I bring on a food safety guest just to understand. Whether current technologies or curious about like how they think is a big one, actually. And I think with my food job rocks, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that different people from different departments think differently, and if we respect that and understand where they come from, you actually become a more productive, essentially, ecosystem.
And you mentioned earlier you're over 250 episodes now. I mean, congrats. That's amazing. I think we're on episode 31 or 32, somewhere in that area. And
nice.
It's been a long road to get that many. So 250 is definitely an accomplishment. And I've had the chance to listen to some of your episodes. And I'm wondering if you have a favorite episode, a personal favorite, and also a crowd favorite, maybe an episode with the most listens or downloads.
Yeah. So my personal she's a dietitian from Taco Bell. Her name is Missy Shaypak. I think it's episode 91. One, she's amazing, but two, like having this tells you some important things. Like, okay, why would a fast food company want a registered dietitian? It sparks a lot of questions, but it makes sense at the end of the day. So Missy did get hired, kind of, I don't want to say accidentally, but more so got hired as a force fit. So just there wasn't like a role that said registered dietitian. She joined and made the role herself, which is a very important takeaway. So with the registered dietitian background, she can make goals and then implement them in Taco Bell. And the way she talks is great because she talks in metrics, which means like, during my time, for example, I took around X amount of sugar or grams of sugar away from Taco Bell, or I reduced the sodium by X amount, as kind of these goalposts for there. She also introduced a vegetarian menu. She's done a lot of initiatives to improve Taco Bell's health credential, or not health credentials, improve Taco Bell's kind of image. So there was an article, like let's say on Foodbeast, saying Taco Bell is the low-key healthiest restaurant in the United States, and that is mainly because of her. So you know, that podcast is an example of just someone who, you know, has a job that no one really expects but does a lot of impact, and those are the jobs that I really like to see when I interview. They are hard to kind of get, and because no one likes to talk about them. But in my opinion, that's what makes companies unique. So that's my favorite episode. The most downloaded episode is a professor from North Carolina State University, and this guy is a very prolific, just nice guy. He's really inspired a lot of food scientists to become food scientists in North Carolina State University. Every time I mention him, he's like, "Oh yeah, he's amazing." And so, you know, I think once you have fans, the good news about guest podcasts is that generally people want to know more about the people that have impacted them. So, for example, for him, Gabriel Keith Harris from NCSU. People want to know more about him, and so they would throughout his influence, throughout how he's influenced people throughout his teaching years, they really wanted to know him. So that's why I believe that episode got the most, is because he really did make an impact in people's lives.
And have you had any podcasts that maybe focus on moisture control or water activity, anything like that?
Never. Sorry. No, I have not. Yeah.
Well, I guess my next question is, would you like to have an episode like that?
Yeah, we'll see. Unfortunately, I am booked, dude. But yeah, I mean, this is a good pitch, I guess. This is a long game pitch. Yeah, well, let's talk. I will say though that I am limiting. I made this promise to a lot of people. I am limiting the guests to just who I'm traveling with, and every time I go to a new place, like there seems to be tons of people I can interview. But I'll let you know.
Sure. And I'm just kind of kidding around, but I am just kind of wondering, you know, if moisture or water control is something that comes up among all of these different scientists that you speak to, or if it's something maybe that people need more education on.
Yeah, I think we take it for granted, right? Like, I don't know, do you mean water activity or moisture content? Those are kind of like the bread and butter of essentially basic science in the food industry, which then people take for granted, right? It's like I don't know, boiling water. Like no one wants to talk about boiling water, but you know it is important because then how specific do you want to get on that? So you know, I do like it when I interview people who have an obsession with a certain category or a specific topic. But yeah, I haven't interviewed that many analytical, especially from what I understand, instruments in that way. I think maybe once or twice, but no, I forgot. But anyways, it you know, it just tells you how wide the food industry is, and depending on what topic you really want to go to, like there is an expert in almost anything you could think of.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I've learned as well, being able to speak with other food scientists is kind of like you said before, everybody knows a little bit. And I think it works best when we all kind of collectively come together and learn and bounce ideas back and forth. And this kind of leads me to my next question as food scientists, because you get to speak to so many different food scientists at lots of different companies and lots of different positions. In your opinion, what can we as food scientists collectively be doing better to advance our field of study?
Yeah, I think you see this a lot in the corporate world is that it's easy to get siloed into your department, thinking that your department is kind of the best and that they're always right. What My Food Job Rocks has really shed the light is that essentially we're all passionate human beings that want to do the best job possible. And every business unit has its own directives in a sense where may clash with your own department's directives, and that's okay. I think we can't go into screaming matches or passive aggressive disagreements when we deal with difficult problems, especially when it comes to commercializing certain things. This happens quite often. No one likes to talk about it, but it happens all the time in pretty much all companies. The bigger the company, generally, the harder it is. And so, I think advice for especially young professionals is really like, talk to the other side and understand where they're coming from, and try to be I would say even the champion to bring those sides together is really important, and it'll help you throughout your whole career. I think if you are super ambitious and you're listening to this, if VPs and executives, their whole kind of career trajectory is about fixing these problems. Really is about being the one who steps up, being the one who wipes off all of the noise and all of the kind of drama, and pushes people to a clear path forward. And I think if we have more young people who take the initiative, and I will say that this is very hard to do, by understanding one another, I think we'll have a better food industry.
And finally, what is next for you, and what is next for your podcast? You've talked about how it's evolved over time. Where do you see this podcast going, maybe in 5-10 years down the road?
Oh man, another 5 or 10 years. I don't know.
Or 1 year or 6 months. What is next?
Yeah, I mean, so every year I would write these kind of sappy posts about my life, just a whole review of how I wanted My Food Job Rocks to go, and I would say it's like 80% of those visions didn't fruition, and that's fine. And I think that's at least I tried and it didn't work, and I'm like, okay, we'll try the next thing that comes to mind. Or maybe I just got bored with it. So I think the big one is that I don't like to think in 5 to 10 year increments. I just for me, that just hasn't worked well in my life. For me, every year has been exciting and has been full of adventure. And if I had a plan, I don't think it would have been as exciting. And so I would treat it the same way. I think the big one, though, is that I don't want My Food Job Rocks just be My Food Job Rocks, and this is going to sound like a selfish, egotistical, maniac, but I want to be someone who's well known in the food industry. I think can you take away Adam Yee from My Food Job? If Adam Yee goes somewhere, what does that mean? Does the My Food Job Rocks name carry with it? What carries with it when I split apart from My Food Job Rocks? And I've done some experience with this, and essentially everyone who listens to the podcast doesn't think I'm a food scientist or an entrepreneur. But when I split away from that, everyone thinks I'm not a podcaster. So it's been a very interesting mix up in terms of going splitting away from the podcast. But yeah, I do want to be more I don't want to say opinionated, but I do want to. I do feel like I want to be someone whose thoughts do matter in the food industry, and I think I'm leaning more into that as I continue on with my Food Job Rocks. I think before I just wanted to be someone who just interviewed people and would post those interviews up. But as over time, I think, and this involves a lot with, getting more experience and getting more accomplishments and blah, blah, blah. It's just something that I think my ego wants to feed more than anything. But it seems like people like my opinions sometimes. I haven't met a hater who hated my opinions. I'll say that. It's something that I've been implementing a little bit more on the new episodes of My Food Job Rocks. So you'll hear a lot more about some small business insights. And you'll also hear kind of more wholesome topics at the end. And I didn't do that before. So I think the evolution will be more, how do I separate, or if I separate My Food Job Rocks, who's Adam Yee? I think that's where it's going right now. Whether I like it or not.
I just think, I think for me, just in my opinion, I view you as becoming somebody in a leader in the food industry, because to me, you're somebody who acts as glue almost to coordinate all of these different food scientists and bring them together and say, it's okay for you to come on this show and talk about your problems and your journey, because that can really benefit another food scientist or a group of food science or another company. And that's something that I strive for as well myself, getting these insights and making a food science network where we can all benefit. So I really appreciate your time, Adam. You're somebody who I look up to and somebody who has set a really good example of how you've started a podcast, and it's evolved over time and it continues to grow. So I really appreciate your insights today and your time. Yeah,
thanks for inviting me, Zach. This was really fun.
I'm Zachary Cartwright. This is Water and Food. Find this podcast on Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.